Well, it's all going on at the BBC at the moment, isn't it? Here we are again, engulfed in yet another crisis. This paragon of the British establishment, the British Broadcasting Corporation, and I know other people have got different names for the BBC, are embroiled in a further crisis that's just swallowed up their Director General and their Director of News. So let's have a quick look what all this is about, and then we'll get into some commenting. But before we do that, welcome back to Andy Talks, the news, current affairs and general chit-chat channel discussing all things happening in Great Britain at the moment. Please do like and subscribe and leave a comment in the box below. So let's get into this. Let's head over to the browser, and it all started a week ago with this little clip from the Daily Telegraph. Now this news broke on the 3rd of November, as we can see from here. This is now the 10th of November as this is being made. So 1 week ago, the Telegraph broke this exclusive news that the BBC had edited and doctored a clip of Donald Trump at the election campaign, or rather in 2021, after he lost the election and before the Capitol riots. This was a pivotal moment in American history. But let's see what the BBC did and what they had to say about this here.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you. And we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
So the clip on the right here is what Donald Trump actually said. And the clip on the left is what went out on the BBC Panorama programme in January 2021, I think it was. I did try to have a look on the iPlayer to see if I could find this, and didn't find it. So here, this went out last seen on BBC Two, it says, on November 2024. So it's saying here, for the past 2 years, the Panorama has been following some of Donald Trump's most ardent supporters. They tell Panorama why they want to give him a second chance in and out of the White House. It says this episode is currently not available, so we can't watch the clip there and what they actually did. This is not untypical of iPlayer after a year moting to get taken off or come back again. I have tried some of these older Panorama programs as well, so this is not Panorama trying to hide it. However, let's just get back to this article for a moment in the Telegraph. I know, what do you think? What do you think about, first of all, the BBC, the paragon of the news globally, largely held to be the bastion of truth around the world? Now, I'm trying not to laugh as I'm saying that, because many people, including myself, have a lot to say against the BBC and a lot to say against BBC News. It is part of the mainstream news architecture, that is a mouthpiece for the British state and the British government. It's been very closely linked to some of the corruption in the British government and some of the paedophile scandals like Jimmy Savile and Rolf Harris over the years. And linking to other very famous people that it's covered up the activities of, and we know that from a news point of view, they are mainstream media. They do just say what the government wants them to say, what the powers that be want to be said. But nevertheless, they are seen by many people, particularly the older generation, as a bastion of the truth. So let me just play a little bit more truth for you again.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you. And we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
So just to remind you of the truth the BBC purports, this time it's being caught with his pants down, being outed by one of his own editors. So I said this was a week ago this came out. So the day afterwards, not on that one, the day afterwards, this lady, this is the chair of the Commons Media and Sports Select Committee, Dame Caroline Denny-Edge. She sent a letter, which I showed here, to the chairperson of the BBC, Samir Shah, saying this. So she basically asked, they wanted answers to what was going on. So what actions are you as the chair taking to address the specific concerns raised in Mr Prescott's report? What are the findings of the high-level effectiveness review of the BBC's editorial guidelines and standards committee undertaken by Chris Saul over the summer? Hey, they wanted recording with animals in the room, eh? So she's asking now, what were the findings of the high-level effectiveness review of the BBC's editorial guidelines and standards committee undertaken by Chris Saul over the summer? What actions are you taking as chair in light of Mr Saul's review and the issues that have arisen this year, which the committee has discussed with you, to ensure that the BBC editorial guidelines and standards committee is working effectively? And what assurance can you give that this process would have changed? What assurances can you give that the processes and practices have changed sufficiently to be confident it would not happen again? I would welcome your response by Monday, the 10th of November, which is today. Now, this person, this Samir Shah, the chairperson of the board of the BBC, the person that sits above the Director General, above the CEO of the news channels, etc., etc. This is the person in charge of everybody at the BBC, and in my opinion, Samir Shah should have come out on day one that it's broken the Telegraph and to address the issue. This came out last Monday, a week ago. This is the person that should have come out at the top to immediately address it, to make a statement, to say something. However, Samir Shah is this chap here, this is on the Daily Express, he is due to make a statement, I think, at about 4 o'clock today, maybe a bit later on. We'll see what he has to say later. But unfortunately, he's been very silent, really. Nothing much has happened at the BBC that we've seen this week. I must reiterate, it's a week since it broke, since that our British BBC, the institution, tried to corrupt reporting of the US elections for BBC Panorama, which is meant to be one of the most esteemed documentary series in the world, with the highest editorial standards and the guidelines there. However, this person has said nothing to Samir Shah. What we have seen are the resignations of these two. Okay, this is Tim Davie, the former now Director General of the BBC. He was in charge of BBC when this went on air, on the Panorama aired. And then this lady, Deborah Turness, she's the head of BBC News. She wasn't even working for BBC News when this Panorama aired, when it was made, produced, edited and cut. She wasn't even working for the BBC at that point, I don't believe. Please do correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. However, these two have both resigned last night. And in typical Donald Trump style, he sent out a tweet on his on Trump Social, whatever it's called, Truth Social, describing Davie and Turness as very dishonest people who tried to step on the scales of presidential election. Truth Social, that was it. In an interview published on Friday, Trump's press secretary, Caroline Levitt, also described the BBC as 100% fake news and a propaganda machine. That's a very, very, very strong thing. It's 100% fake news and a propaganda machine. Now, many of us think that way already about the BBC and all the other news channels for that matter, including the Telegraph. They are mainstream media. Not much gets through them. It's not meant to be out there. And there's some rumblings that this is a bit of an assassination attempt on these two guys. That these two guys are taking the fall for something that maybe wasn't their fault. Certainly, Tim Davie, he wouldn't have edited it, he wouldn't have cut it, he probably wouldn't have even seen it before it was aired. Obviously, he was the Director General, it would come back on him ultimately. But he was not responsible for the edits that happened. And I believe the people that were responsible for it have now left the BBC. And again, she wasn't working there either. She wasn't working there at the time. And no, nor was, going back to Samir Shah, no, he wasn't working for the BBC either. However, my assertion that him being head of the board of the BBC, he should have taken control of this. He was the one at the top. He's the one that's most accountable. He should have been in charge of hirings and firings and managing this crisis at the BBC, rather than waiting for these resignations of these two guys here. It seems like they're taking initiative. They are doing the driving of it. That Samir Shah has lost the command, I think. In BBC. And I personally think Samir Shah should be resigning as well. However, let's just go back to this letter. By Dame Caroline Dinenage, or Dinenage, however you pronounce that. I'm not aware if it's been answered or not yet. She's asked the relevant questions. But you can yourself also see the entire dossier, as they're calling it, or the documents exposing it, or the memo, whatever you want, on the Telegraph website, which I'll put in the below. It's just behind a paywall, and as much as I would love to give you unfiltered access to this, it does give the full report here, the full dossier, as they call it. I can't give you access to that because it is copyright on the Telegraph. However, it does talk about the US election. It talks about the documentary here. It talks about various other things. Let's just scroll down a bit further. So on Liz Cheney, I know there was another comment about Liz Cheney and how the BBC had said that Donald Trump had called for her death or something along those lines. But that wasn't true at all. US election coverage more broadly, it talks about how the BBC appeared to be very against Trump and pro Kamala Harris. And I think we can see, from our own experience, we can see that the BBC was against Donald Trump. There was a considerable, Trump backlash in that. In racial diversity, again, now I'm not going to go through all these individually, but it made other claims here, and it can go on and on and on and on. But let me just go back up to the top of here. It's got things about the biological section, gender. It did appear to become very woke at the BBC, adopting a wholesale trans ideology without question. And I think some of the more recent series of Doctor Who are a great example of this. When we first had a female doctor, Jodie Whittaker, we had some god awful woke story writing for that. Political correctness and potentially lesbian relationships with the Doctor, and then we went on to have Ncuti Gatwa as the Black Doctor, the first Black Doctor there, and again some somewhat politically correct, trans ideological storylines going on there, somewhat confused, somewhat messed up, and as a result of this, the ratings for Doctor Who have gone right down from this woke ideology. So much so that Disney have pulled out and they've cancelled it. So Disney are no longer working with the BBC to produce Doctor Who. There may, according to latest reports, be some Doctor Who made by the BBC towards the end of 2026. But that's just an example of their woke ideology, their desire to get people in roles just for the sake of it. I've got nothing against Ncuti Gatwa being a Black Doctor. We could have had a straight Black Doctor, that would have kept it simple, but it said we had to go for trans or gay or whatever it was. I don't know who only knows. Black Doctor. It was a bit too woke, a bit too pushing the boundaries out there. Same with Jodie Whittaker before that. It didn't need to be the case. We could have had a great storyline with the first female Doctor. Instead, we had this woke BS, history revisionism going on. That wasn't. No, that's my personal opinion. I don't like it. I think it spoiled the series somewhat. As a big Doctor Who fan, I think that spoiled it. But I think this is a big thing what it's talking about there. With Israel-Hamas war, we've seen a somewhat, Palestine sympathising arc from the BBC, and not reporting so much in the way of some of the Israel damage that's been done by Hamas and the Hamas terrorists, and the misreporting of things like where they recorded a genocide being done by Israeli soldiers when in fact it was done by Hamas. So many things going on here. I'm not going to go into all of them. This is just scratching the surface. But however, if you want to read it, do head up to the Daily Telegraph website. It is behind a paywall. This was posted on the 6th of November. Just look for this title. Look for this memo. You'll be able to find it fairly easily at the moment. I'll try and remember to put the link in the comments as well, or in the description rather, below that. But no, what do you think of it? Or what do you think of this supposed crisis at the BBC again? And arguably we've got one of the paragons of let me just put you back onto full screen actually. One of the paragons of the British establishment, the BBC, under attack. And now, arguably, there's been some attack from the right wing saying that that the BBC should be disbanded, it should be no longer funded by a licence fee. I do agree with the abolition of licence fee myself. I think it is another tax on consumerism that we shouldn't have to. That the BBC shouldn't be a government-run organisation. It should be put on a subscription basis, so only those people that want to use it can use it. That seems to be the world these days. I don't agree with the licence fee. I don't agree with the licence fee collection and some of the harassment letters they're sending out, but I'm not going to get into that today. But no, the BBC itself is one of the most British institutions you can get. And this is damaging, I think, to British institutions. Right on the back of the Prince Andrew stuff that's going on still at the moment behind all this, and the royal family, and again on the back of that we've got our total government incompetence and ineptitude going on. And I think a lot of what we're seeing Britain like a laughing stock at the moment. We've got a lot of nonsense going on in our country. It's completely unnecessary. Maybe this is taking attention away from digital ID, from HMRC and their spying and watching on you. Maybe this is a distraction from something else that we should be looking at instead of this. This will all blow over in the end. But I think the BBC, it could be toast after this. It could be gone. It could be privatised and sold off, and I think there's certainly some political movement for that. Personally, I don't think it should be a state-run institution at all. But however, I do think it is more than likely a distraction story, and we should be focusing more on digital ID, on the surveillance state, on the issues of the economy, and how people are going to survive after Rachel Reeves' budget is coming up. But anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Let me know in the comments what you think about this whole BBC saga. It doesn't make me happy at all. But anyway, until the next time, see you, catch you later, bye bye.